Hello and welcome to another NihongoGamer video looking at the Neogeo Pocket Color Selection Volume 1, which is 10 games from this handheld, which I'm pretty sure no one else actually bought. I had one personally, but it didn't actually last very long, this handheld. It was out for maybe less than a year and then they discontinued it. But in that less than a year that it was out, we got so many awesome games, and that is basically what this collection is kind of showing. This is where it becomes kind of interesting. It's like, if these games are so good, why don't they just release them all one by one instead of releasing them as a collection? And it's obviously that some of these games you probably wouldn't bother buying in the modern day separately. Even if they were like $5 or $10 each, you'd be like, do I really need Crush Roller, or have you even heard of Crush Roller? Whereas some of these games like Fatal Fury, Metal Slug, Second Mission, KOF-R2, Gals Fighters, which was already released separately, those are games that you're like, okay, I would buy them separately. But then for SNK, that's like, okay, that's $10 here or $20 there. If they sell this collection for $40, then they can offer you good value, because that's 10 games for the price of less than one full-priced game. And at the same time, they get rid of a bunch of games that, you know, maybe they were not going to be able to sell separately on their own anyway. So here's the question. Is it worth the price for these 10 games? Or would you be better off just buying one of these games for like $10 and not spending $40? That's what we're going to be trying to answer today. It is, of course, a little bit difficult to review 10 games all at the same time, but we're going to just go through my opinions on all of them. Now, before we go any further, just want to point out that I was sent this for the purposes of making this review, so I didn't go out and buy it personally, but I am going to give you my opinions on whether I would spend $40 on a collection like this at the end. So the first thing we should start with is what games are actually included in this collection. The big ones are King of Fighters R2, Last Blade, Samurai Shodown, and Gals Fighters. But let's go through the games that are included one by one. This one is called Big Tournament Golf. I believe it's also known as Neo Turf Masters. I don't know anyone who's really into golf games, but this one is surprisingly fun to play. Crush Roller, I think this is the one game on this set which is not even made by SNK, and in the West it was known as Wild Tracks, but it's basically Pac-Man. That's a terrible thing to say, but it's basically Pac-Man with changes, which makes it a little more, in my opinion, a little bit more fun than Pac-Man. Dark Arms, I didn't really spend much time playing with this, but it's a little bit of an adventure. If you remember when Metal Gear Solid was turned into a Game Boy Color game, like it went from a 3D game to like a Game Boy Color 2D, you walk around on, it's basically turned into Zelda. That's what that feels like. These are the fighting games. There are 5 fighting games included with this collection. You get Fatal Fury First Contact, SNK Gals Fighters, King of Fighters R2, The Last Blade, and also Samurai Shodown 2. Then you've got Metal Slug First Mission and Metal Slug Second Mission. If you know anything about Metal Slug games, you'll know that these are brilliant, fun games. And they're included as part of the 10 games on this set. My first impression when it comes to this collection is, yes, you should absolutely buy it. If anything, only for this one game, King of Fighters R2. Now, I don't think this game is worth $40 today, but that's how much I paid for it. This is a game that came out for the Neogeo Pocket Color like right at the start. And I was like, wow, you can play King of Fighters on a handheld. It looks wildly different. And I was blown away that this was even possible. Until this handheld came out, I really felt like fighting games on handhelds were a bit of a waste of time. There are no shoulder buttons on this console. And so the way they made it work on this game in particular, they used a quick tap on the button to do a light punch. They used a hold button. You like held it down for like almost a second, and that's how you would get a strong attack. In a way, yes, it's worth $40 just for this one game, King of Fighters R2. But that's not how much I would pay for it in 2021, which is when I'm making this review. This is the sort of game that you would spend maybe $10, which is what they were charging on the eShop for things like SNK Gals Fighters. But for $40, you get this included with 9 other games. The first game on the list is Neo Turf Masters. I'm not really a golf game fan, but this is the sort of game that, because there were so few games on the Neo Geo handheld when it came out, the Neo Geo Pocket Color when it came out, you were quite grateful for anything that came your way. And this is one of those games that was like surprising. You bought it, you're like, I don't even really like golf, but I want a new Neo Geo Pocket Color game. So you'd buy this, and then you'd try it, and you're just like, hey, you know what? golf games are actually surprisingly enjoyable. This is the sort of game that you would be quite happy to play, even if you're not into golf games, if you had it in your game case. Wouldn't buy it on its own, but now that I've got it, would play it. But I wouldn't play it on my PC. If I were sitting at my PC, this is not the game that I would boot up. I would only boot this up if I had it, like, on a handheld. So, if you have a Steam handheld, and most of you probably don't yet because the Steam Deck hasn't come out, I find it unlikely that you would boot this up very often. Crush Roller. Had never heard of this game, and I'm going to be honest, straight off the bat, I'm going to just tell you my opinion. I wouldn't have thought to buy this game. It's basically Pac-Man if Pac-Man were Splatoon. So normally you're actually eating little pellets like in Pac-Man, but in this game you're painting the floor, which effectively is exactly the same thing, but it's more interesting than Pac-Man. It's got these little rollers. If you can tempt these guys into this bridge here, you can eat them by pushing this paint roller, or you can just use your standard paint roller to do the main game, which is to paint the floor. After you've played it for maybe 10 or 15 minutes, you'll be like, okay, that was surprisingly fun. But again, I don't think you would ever boot it up again. Dark Arms. Now, I believe this is a spin-off of a different game called Dark Arms, but this is the spin-off that they made for the Neogeo Pocket Color, so it would like fit a handheld console experience rather than an arcade experience. You're running around and shooting things, and you can talk to characters and go through things, menus. But I wasn't particularly interested in this sort of game, so I didn't really spend much time testing it. But you can see, you know, it's an enjoyable experience. It's a full-on game, and I'm sure that it's good fun if you do continue playing it. But it's just not really the sort of game that I would play. I can see people booting this up even if you play on PC, because it's actually its own game. It's not specifically a game that you would only play when you're standing at the bus stop. This is a game that you would boot up because you want to finish it and get to the end. The other 7 games in this collection are basically all games that you'd probably happily spend $8 to $10 buying. So you get 5 fighting games: Fatal Fury, Gals Fighters, KOF R2, Last Blade, and Samurai Shodown. And of those games, 4 of them are straight up handheld versions of arcade games that you could play on arcade hardware or on good home console ports. Playing these pocket versions, I was pleasantly surprised. I was like, wow, yeah, this is a more fun experience than trying to play the full-on arcade game on a handheld, because the game is slightly simplified with the tap for light buttons and hold for strong buttons. Now, having said that, there's one thing holding these fighting games back from being games that you would actually boot up regularly and play on your PC or on your Switch handheld or whatever. Tap for a light button and hold for a heavy button. That system worked well because it was necessary. Like on the handheld, it needed to be simplified so that you're not trying to faff with 4 buttons and complicated inputs. It's just like, okay, it's very simple. Hold it down when I want to do a heavy attack, tap it when I want to do a light attack. Especially works really well for people who are casual players, just mashing buttons, and they'll just notice that heavy attacks come out sometimes and light attacks come out other times. The system is deep, and you would boot it up even on your PC just to play these games. It doesn't have to be a handheld to play them. The thing is, it feels unresponsive. It takes forever. And then even worse when you hold down a button. You would not expect such a huge delay from any other modern fighting game. I don't know. Do I really want to go back to an era where this was actually necessary? Pocket Rumble. Clearly the system was fun enough that someone wanted to devote their time to making their own game just like this, that felt just like this. But if you're not in it for the nostalgia, or if you don't particularly think that system works well, then compared to a lot of modern fighting games that you can get on Steam for the same price or less, it's like, I don't know, it feels kind of sluggish. Now, having said that, there is one game on this system which is slightly less sluggish. This one, Gals Fighters, which came out, I think it already came out like a couple years ago, like sold separately for $10. The thing about this game is that it's 60 FPS, unlike the other one. You can see it looks significantly smoother than the other ones. And of course, it still has that delay when you press the button. You still have to wait before the fight, you know, the attack actually comes out. You get used to it, but it does feel a little sluggish compared to modern games. It's like you're playing the game online even though you're not online. So even though it uses the same input speed as the other fighting games in this collection, the fact that it's 60 FPS does make it feel a bit smoother and more pleasant to play. Most people who will buy this collection, you'll play through some of them a few times and then you'll probably just forget about it. And that's a bit of a shame because fighting games they're like mostly fun when you devote some time to them, learn the ins and outs, and then you reap the benefits. But unfortunately, because the game doesn't have a multiplayer component, there's not many times when you'll actually reap the benefits or the real satisfaction. If you click on versus mode, it opens up another emulator and it runs two versions of the ROM at the same time as if they were two Neogeo Pocket Colors linked together. And as you can see, you've got individual control of each screen. Very impressed. I think that's good. I think that's brilliant, but I still don't see a way to play it online. But the fact that it's got this mode is definitely a huge positive for this game, because let's say that you are having a party at your house. If you just boot up your PC, put this into versus mode, it's kind of fun. It's like, whoa, so this is kind of what it was like to be playing on two head-to-head arcade machines, because you've both got your own screen. Of course, they're basically showing almost exactly the same thing. I only wish that it had online as well. I think that would be awesome, but for $40, you can forgive them for not having an online mode as well. So if you understand that and you don't mind, then actually all of these fighting games are brilliant, brilliant fun. Fatal Fury, classic game. Gals Fighters, its own special thing, and much smoother than any of the other fighting games that ever came out on this platform, because most of them were 30 FPS. KOF is a full-on KOF game, team fighting game. Last Blade, a sword action game like Samurai Shodown, but a little faster and a little bit more active. You just press more buttons more often. And Samurai Shodown, these slower, but you really feel the damage when you actually hit someone. And that brings us to the final two games in the selection, which are Metal Slug First Mission and Metal Slug Second Mission. Now, Metal Slug First Mission feels, again, you boot it up, you're like, whoa, it's Metal Slug, but in a slightly more handheld fashion. Now, because we're not playing it on a handheld, it just feels like a low-res, simplified version of Metal Slug, but it is no less fun. This is straight up Metal Slug action. You're running around melee attacking, you're shooting things, pointing it in all sorts of different directions. There are plane episodes, figuring out when to use your alternate weapons and all that. Metal Slug First Mission is genuinely good fun. And then if you are done with Metal Slug First Mission, it gets even better, because for Second Mission, they actually improves a bit on the gameplay to make it a little smoother. Instead of pressing the option button to switch between your main weapon and your second weapon, you just press the options button and it just automatically throws these grenades out, which, as you can see here, I've just set the options button to be one of my action buttons. So I've got A, B, and options instead of setting options to one of my actual options buttons. There are a few features that are also included that are, worth mentioning. When you go into the game, you also get a look at the box in 3D. And I wasn't aware of this until I opened it up, but once you've clicked on it again, it actually opens up the box and shows you a 3D model of the cartridge case, which if you click on, then opens up, and you also get a 3D model of the cartridge itself. You can spin it around in 3D and have a look at even the little PCB on the inside there. In addition to the 3D models of the box, you also get access to the original manual for the game, so you can go through and read exactly what was presented to people who bought the cartridge versions of these games. And I really want to stress this. These games cost between like $25 to $40 each when they came out, because a lot of the time, if you didn't have battery in your console or the console was at home, you could do nothing but read the manual on the way home while you were like getting yourself hyped up about what character you were going to play when you finally get home and put the cartridge in the console. Another feature which is pretty cool about these collections is that you can change the language of the game and the manual. So if you switch if you change it to English, you actually see a different 3D model for the cartridge. So it's like the whole 3D version of the cartridge. You get the Japanese version of the manual as well. If you change the language here, it also boots up a completely different ROM, the Japanese ROM of the game. And so you're playing it with Japanese language, you're playing it with any minor differences that they might have been between the games. So that's the whole collection. And to be quite honest, for $40, you're getting a lot of games that all cost maybe between $25 and $40 each when they came out. So value-wise, it is, in a way, worth it. But in 2021, the question you have to ask yourself is, are you really going to bother playing any of these games? I think there are some that are better suited to be played on a PC. You're like, okay, I would play Metal Slug. I don't mind. But the fighting games, Essentially, these are like pocket versions of something that you can already play full versions on a handheld. So it's like, I don't see much reason to play these pocket versions of the fighting game unless you're really into the aesthetic and the playstyle, the simplified playstyle. It's almost like if you don't already play a lot of fighting games, maybe it'll get you into fighting games because, you've got a simple 2-button fighting style. But the main thing about this collection is that, as far as I'm aware, you can't play this online. And as companies go, SNK is definitely the one that has been doing the best at adding good online netplay to their old legacy titles, because in the past 2 years alone, they've added a rollback netcode, which makes it really smooth online for Last Blade 2, it's like Samurai Shodown 5 Special, King of Fighters 2002 Ultimate Match. They've got a beta coming out for KOF 98, and then the new KOF, King of Fighters 15, already has rollback built into it. So if there's any company out there which is going to add rollback to a legacy title, if there's a desire for it from the community, then I think SNK is definitely the one to rely on. Anyway, that is it for my opinions on the Neo Geo Pocket Color Selection Volume 1. I think all these games are awesome. Even the 3 bonus games that I just wasn't really that interested in before, I would play them, but I don't think I would play them more than once. But that's fine, because there's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 other games that you can play, and 5 of them are brilliant fighting games, and 2 of them are brilliant Metal Slug games. I love them. The thing is, these fighting games felt great at the time. Now they feel a little bit sluggish. So if you don't think that you'd like the unresponsive feel, these games can feel like a bit of a slog to get through when you're like, well, I could just play a normal fighting game, which is actually fast and responsive. But if you're in it for the nostalgia, and you're also in it for the aesthetic, and you like that system, the tap for a light button and press the hold up button for a strong attack, that works really, really well, and it's intact. That experience, like it was on the original console, it's still right there and has not been lost. All in all, my opinion is it's an inexpensive way to get 10 games, and they're all actually really good. I just don't think I would spend like a lot of time playing any of them. I'll just boot them up every now and then for a bit of fun. Or if I've got a party, it's just like, I would definitely boot this up, because if you can play any of these fighting games in 2-player mode, this would definitely be a brilliant, fun thing to leave on one of the tables at a party or something. And it's also just easy to get into because it's a 2-button fighting system. But don't be fooled, a 2-button fighting system can also be quite complex. That's all for now. If you enjoyed this review, then I've got another video coming out on SNK versus Capcom, Match or Mark of the Millennium, which is another Neo Geo Pocket Color game, so look out for that review coming up soon. Like the video, that always helps, and do leave a comment. Is this a collection that you've already purchased and you'd like to say something that you like about it? Or are you looking at it and going, there's a few things that this needs to be worth $40 to me? Let me know in the comments section below. Until the next NihongoGamer video, I'll see you around.